This channel contains accounts of real crimes and may include details that are disturbing to some viewers. It is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. In February of 2003, a 25-year-old woman named Jennifer Lynn Marcum believed she was about to start a new chapter in her life. She had met a man who claimed to be a successful businessman, someone who painted a picture of opportunity and prosperity that seemed too good to be true. And as we'll discover today, it absolutely was. Jennifer thought she was heading to Denver International Airport on February 17, 2003, to begin a journey to Seattle, where she would help manage what she believed was a chain of coffee shops. Instead, she was walking into the hands of one of Colorado's most dangerous serial killers, a man who was simultaneously working as an FBI informant while murdering innocent people. Her brown 1999 Saturn was found abandoned near the airport, but Jennifer herself vanished without a trace. What makes this case particularly chilling is that more than 20 years later, despite a confession from her killer, Jennifer's body has never been found. Her family has lived in agonizing uncertainty, knowing who took their daughter's life, but not where she was laid to rest. This is the story of Jennifer Lynn Marcum, a young woman whose trust was exploited by a predator hiding in plain sight, whose death exposed serious flaws in federal law enforcement operations, and whose family continues to search for answers more than 2 decades after she disappeared. This video is intended to raise awareness about Jennifer's disappearance and the ongoing search for her remains. The case of Jennifer Marcum involves complex criminal activity, federal investigations, and serial murder. All information presented here comes from official law enforcement sources, court records, FBI documentation, and established news reports from credible media outlets. We'll be discussing the activities of Scott Kimball, a convicted serial killer who confessed to Jennifer's murder. While we'll cover the facts of the case comprehensively, we'll treat this story with the respect that Jennifer and her family deserve. This is not entertainment. This is about a real person whose life was cut short and a family that continues to seek closure. Our goal is to keep Jennifer's case in public awareness, potentially generate new leads about the location of her remains, and ensure that her story serves as both a memorial to her life and a cautionary tale about the dangers that vulnerable people face from predators who exploit trust and desperation. Welcome to Vanished Voices, where real crime unfolds in plain sight. Today, we're examining one of the most baffling missing person cases in American history. Jennifer Lynn Marcum disappeared on February 17, 2003, from the Denver, Colorado area. She was 25 years old at the time of her disappearance and would be 47 years old today if she were still alive. Jennifer may have used the surnames Hoyle or Wiggins in addition to Marcum. She was described as having blonde hair and blue eyes, standing approximately 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighing around 130 pounds. What sets Jennifer's case apart from many missing person investigations is that we know with certainty what happened to her, yet the case remains frustratingly incomplete. Scott Lee Kimball, a man who was simultaneously serving as an FBI informant while committing a series of murders across Colorado, confessed to killing Jennifer. In 2009, Kimball was sentenced to 70 years in prison for multiple murders, including Jennifer's death. However, despite Kimball's confession and conviction, Jennifer's body has never been recovered. This means that while legal justice has been served, Jennifer's family has never been able to lay her to rest or have the closure that comes with recovery of remains. The FBI continues to list Jennifer as a missing person, and the search for her body remains an active priority. Jennifer worked as an exotic dancer at Shotgun Willie's, a well-known establishment in the Denver area. Like many young women in challenging circumstances, she was looking for opportunities to improve her life and create a better future for herself. This desire for a fresh start would ultimately make her vulnerable to Scott Kimball's manipulation and lies. The case intersects with several broader issues: the vulnerability of marginalized populations to predators, the failures in FBI informant operations, and the particular challenges faced by families when remains are never recovered despite solved cases. To understand the tragedy of what happened to Jennifer Marcum, we need to understand who she was as a person. Jennifer was not just a statistic or a case file. She was a 25-year-old woman with hopes, dreams, and aspirations for her future. Jennifer worked as a stripper at Shotgun Willie's, a prominent adult entertainment venue in the Denver area. This work, while legal, placed her in an environment where she encountered people from all walks of life, some harmless, others potentially dangerous. The nature of her work also meant that she was part of a community that was often marginalized. and sometimes overlooked by broader society when members went missing. Those who knew Jennifer described her as someone who was hopeful about her future despite the challenges she faced. She had experienced the difficulties that many young women encounter: financial struggles, complicated relationships, and the constant search for stability and security. She had a history of childbirth, indicating that at some point she had been a mother, adding another layer of complexity to her life story. Jennifer had breast implants with documented serial numbers, and an IUD was in place at the time of her disappearance. These medical details, while perhaps seeming insignificant, became crucial identifying information that investigators hoped would help locate and identify her remains if they were ever discovered. What made Jennifer particularly vulnerable to predators like Scott Kimball was her openness to opportunity and her trust in people who seemed to offer her a path to a better life. She was not naive, but like many people in difficult circumstances, she was willing to take risks if it meant the possibility of improving her situation. Jennifer's story reflects the experiences of many young women who work in industries that exist on society's margins, people who are often more vulnerable to exploitation and violence, and whose disappearances sometimes receive less attention than they deserve. In the months leading up to her disappearance, Jennifer's life seemed to be taking a positive turn, at least from her perspective. She had met Scott Kimball, though she knew him by a different identity. He had presented himself as a successful businessman with legitimate enterprises and bright prospects. Kimball had constructed an elaborate lie about his background and circumstances. He told Jennifer that he owned a chain of coffee shops in Seattle, Washington, and painted a picture of a thriving business that needed capable management. For Jennifer, who was working as an exotic dancer and likely struggling with the limitations and challenges of that lifestyle, this opportunity seemed like a dream come true. The relationship between Jennifer and Kimball developed relatively quickly. What Jennifer didn't know was that Kimball was already under FBI supervision as a criminal informant. In fact, the initial introduction between Jennifer and Kimball may have occurred through his FBI handler, Agent Bob Schlaff. According to court documents and testimonies, Schlaff had sanctioned the first meeting between Kimball and Marcum, but Kimball soon began seeing her on his own accord, beyond the scope of his official informant activities. This detail is particularly disturbing because it suggests that Jennifer may have first encountered her future killer through an FBI operation. While the exact circumstances of their meeting remain unclear, the fact that the FBI was involved in their initial introduction adds a tragic irony to the case. The very law enforcement agency that should have protected Jennifer may have inadvertently placed her in harm's way. During this period, Kimball was actively deceiving not only Jennifer but also the FBI agents who were handling him as an informant. He had convinced them that he could provide valuable intelligence about criminal activities in the Denver area, including potential murders and drug operations. In reality, Kimball was planning and executing murders himself while reporting fictional criminal activities to his handlers. Jennifer had moved in with Kimball, believing that she was building a life with someone who could provide her with stability and opportunity. She was making plans for their move to Seattle, where she believed she would help manage his coffee shop business. The prospect of leaving behind the uncertainties of her current life for what seemed like a legitimate business opportunity must have seemed like exactly the fresh start she had been hoping for. What makes Jennifer's situation even more heartbreaking is that she was likely genuinely excited about this new chapter in her life. She wasn't just being deceived about Kimball's business prospects, she was being deceived about his entire identity and character. The man she trusted with her future was actually planning her death. In the days immediately preceding February 17, 2003, Jennifer was making concrete preparations for what she believed would be her relocation to Seattle. She was tying up loose ends in Denver, making arrangements for her departure, and preparing for what she thought would be the beginning of a new and better life. The timing of the planned move is significant. February in Colorado is still deep winter, and the prospect of traveling to Seattle, while still cold, might have seemed like a step toward warmer weather and new possibilities. Jennifer was likely dealing with the practical aspects of relocating, deciding what to take with her, what to leave behind, and how to manage the logistics of moving across several states. During this time, Kimball was maintaining his facade as a legitimate businessman. He was likely providing Jennifer with details about their travel plans, the coffee shops he claimed to own, and the role she would play in the business. These conversations would have reinforced Jennifer's belief that she was making a smart decision for her future. Unknown to Jennifer, Kimball was simultaneously planning her murder. The elaborate story about the coffee shops, the move to Seattle, and their future together was all part of his method of gaining complete control over her movements and isolating her from anyone who might notice if she disappeared. This period represents one of the most tragic aspects of Jennifer's case. She spent her final days excited and hopeful about her future, completely unaware that the person she trusted most was planning to kill her. She was likely making mental plans about her new life, perhaps imagining how different things would be in Seattle and looking forward to leaving behind the challenges of her current situation. The psychological manipulation involved in Kimball's approach was extensive and cruel. He wasn't just planning to kill Jennifer. He was torturing her psychologically by making her complicit in her own victimization, leading her willingly toward her death while she believed she was walking toward a better life. February 17, 2003, began as what Jennifer believed would be one of the most important days of her life. The morning likely started early, as air travel typically requires early departures. Jennifer would have been checking her belongings one final time, ensuring she had everything she needed for the trip and the new life she was about to begin. She was dressed for travel and had her personal items with her. At some point that morning, Jennifer and Kimball left their residence and began the journey toward Denver International Airport. The route from central Denver to the airport takes travelers along Pena Boulevard, a relatively isolated stretch of road that leads directly to the airport terminal complex. Jennifer was last seen between 11 a.m. and noon on February 17, 2003, in the vicinity of the 8,500 block of Pena Boulevard near Denver International Airport. This location is significant because it's not at the airport itself, but rather on the approach road leading to the airport. The 8,500 block of Pena Boulevard represents an area that is somewhat isolated, with fewer witnesses and more opportunities for criminal activity than the busy airport terminal areas. The fact that Jennifer was seen in this location suggests that something went wrong before they reached the airport proper. Whatever Kimball's plan was, it was executed somewhere along Pena Boulevard rather than at the airport itself. Jennifer's brown 1999 Saturn IV-door sedan was later found abandoned in the vicinity of this same area. The discovery of her vehicle confirmed that she had indeed been traveling toward the airport, lending credence to the story about their planned trip to Seattle. However, the abandonment of the vehicle also confirmed that Jennifer never made it to her intended destination. This timeline represents the last confirmed sightings of Jennifer alive. After approximately noon on February 17, 2003, Jennifer Lynn Marcum disappeared from the historical record, becoming another statistic in the growing list of Scott Kimball's victims. The events of February 17, 2003, along Pena Boulevard represent one of the most calculated and cruel crimes in Colorado's criminal history. Based on Scott Kimball's later confession and the physical evidence discovered at the scene, we can reconstruct the general sequence of events, though many specific details remain unknown due to Kimball's pattern of lies and misdirection even when confessing to his crimes. Jennifer and Kimball were traveling in Jennifer's 1999 Saturn sedan along Pena Boulevard, the main route to Denver International Airport. At some point during this journey, in the vicinity of the 8,500 block of Pena Boulevard, Kimball attacked Jennifer. The specific method of attack and the exact location remain unclear, as Kimball has provided multiple conflicting accounts of the events. What we know for certain is that Jennifer was killed somewhere in this area, and her body was removed from the scene. Her vehicle was abandoned in a remote parking area near the airport, where it was later discovered by authorities. The positioning of the vehicle was clearly intended to suggest that Jennifer had gone to the airport voluntarily and had, perhaps, traveled somewhere, potentially buying Kimball time before her disappearance would be noticed and reported. The location chosen for this crime demonstrates Kimball's calculating nature. Pena Boulevard, while a major thoroughfare, has stretches that are relatively isolated, particularly in the areas approaching the airport. The vastness of the Colorado landscape around the airport provides numerous opportunities for disposing of evidence and remains without immediate detection. Kimball's status as an FBI informant may have given him insights into how law enforcement investigates missing person cases and homicides. This knowledge could have influenced his choice of location and his methods for disposing of Jennifer's body, making the subsequent investigation more challenging. The cruelty of Kimball's crime extends beyond the murder itself. He had spent weeks or possibly months gaining Jennifer's trust, creating an elaborate fantasy about their future together and leading her to believe that she was making a positive change in her life. The psychological manipulation involved in convincing someone to willingly accompany you to their own murder represents a particularly sadistic form of criminal behavior. Jennifer's final moments remain a mystery, known only to her killer. What we can be certain of is that she faced them believing that she was with someone who cared about her and was helping her build a better life. The betrayal involved in this crime is almost incomprehensible in its depth and cruelty. The discovery that Jennifer was missing unfolded gradually, as is often the case in missing persons situations. When Jennifer failed to return home and couldn't be contacted, those who knew her became increasingly concerned. The discovery of her abandoned Saturn sedan near Denver International Airport confirmed that something was seriously wrong and transformed concerns about her well-being into an active missing person investigation. The initial response to Jennifer's disappearance followed standard protocols for missing person cases. Local law enforcement began by trying to establish a timeline of her last known activities and attempting to contact anyone who might have information about her whereabouts. The discovery of her vehicle near the airport initially suggested that she might have traveled somewhere, possibly voluntarily. However, several factors quickly elevated the case beyond a simple missing person investigation. Jennifer's failure to contact anyone, the abandonment of her vehicle, and the lack of any evidence that she had actually boarded a flight or traveled anywhere all suggested that foul play was involved. The FBI became involved in the investigation early on, partly because of the interstate implications of a potential journey to Seattle, and partly because of jurisdictional issues related to the airport location. What investigators didn't initially realize was that the FBI's own informant operations were directly connected to Jennifer's disappearance. Family members and friends were interviewed extensively, trying to piece together Jennifer's activities and relationships in the days and weeks leading up to her disappearance. This process likely revealed information about her relationship with the man she knew as Scott Kimball, though at this point, investigators had no reason to suspect that he was anything other than a concerned boyfriend whose girlfriend had mysteriously vanished. The initial investigation faced a challenge that confronts many missing person cases. Without a body, without witnesses to a crime, and without clear evidence of violence, it's difficult to determine exactly what happened. The case could have been anything from a voluntary disappearance to kidnapping to murder. Search efforts were concentrated around the airport area where Jennifer's car had been found. Teams searched parking lots, surrounding areas, and any locations where someone might dispose of evidence or remains. However, the vastness of the Colorado landscape around Denver International Airport made comprehensive searching extremely challenging. The early investigation into Jennifer Marcum's disappearance faced numerous challenges that are common in missing person cases, but several unique factors made this case particularly difficult to solve initially. The primary challenge was the lack of witnesses to whatever had happened to Jennifer. Pena Boulevard, while a major route to the airport, has stretches where criminal activity could occur without being observed. The timing of the incident, late morning on a Tuesday, meant that traffic levels were moderate but not heavy enough to guarantee witnesses. Investigators were working with limited physical evidence. Jennifer's abandoned vehicle provided some forensic opportunities, but without obvious signs of violence or struggle, the car revealed little about what had actually happened to her. The location where the vehicle was found suggested that whoever was responsible had some knowledge of the area and had chosen the abandonment site deliberately. The investigation was also hampered by the complexity of Jennifer's lifestyle and relationships. As someone who worked in the adult entertainment industry, Jennifer had contact with a wide variety of people, making it difficult to narrow down potential suspects or persons of interest. Investigators had to carefully examine her professional relationships, personal relationships, and casual acquaintances to try to determine who might have had motive and opportunity to harm her. What investigators couldn't have known at the time was that the person responsible for Jennifer's disappearance was already known to federal law enforcement, not as a suspect, but as a cooperating informant. Scott Kimball's relationship with the FBI meant that he was in a position to potentially learn about the investigation into Jennifer's disappearance, giving him advantages that typical criminals wouldn't have. The geographic scope of the potential crime scene was enormous. If Jennifer had been killed somewhere along Pena Boulevard and her body disposed of elsewhere, she could have been taken anywhere within a several hundred-mile radius. Colorado's diverse terrain, from urban areas to mountains to plains, provided countless locations where remains could be hidden with little chance of discovery. Resource limitations also affected the early investigation. Missing person cases, particularly those involving adults, don't always receive the same level of immediate attention and resources as other types of crimes. Without clear evidence of foul play, investigators had to balance the investigation of Jennifer's disappearance with other ongoing cases and priorities. The case went cold relatively quickly, as often happens when initial leads are exhausted and no new evidence emerges. Jennifer's disappearance joined the ranks of thousands of other missing person cases across the country. Cases that remain open but inactive, waiting for new information or evidence that might reignite the investigation. The breakthrough in Jennifer Marcum's case came not through traditional investigative methods, but through the unraveling of an entirely different set of criminal activities. Scott Lee Kimball's exposure as a serial killer began with investigations into other disappearances and murders, ultimately revealing a web of deception that implicated him in multiple homicides, including Jennifer's death. Scott Kimball was not a typical criminal. Born in 1966, he had a history of various criminal activities, but what set him apart was his ability to manipulate and deceive not just his victims, but law enforcement officials as well. By 2002, Kimball had become a registered FBI informant, designated as a confidential human source who was supposed to provide information about criminal activities in the Denver area. The FBI's relationship with Kimball began as part of their efforts to gather intelligence on various criminal enterprises in Colorado. Kimball presented himself as someone with access to information about drug operations, potential violent crimes, and other federal law enforcement priorities. Agent Robert Schlaff became Kimball's primary handler, managing the relationship and evaluating the information Kimball provided. What federal agents didn't realize was that Kimball was using his position as an informant not to prevent crimes, but to facilitate his own criminal activities. His status as a protected source gave him a sense of invulnerability and provided him with insights into law enforcement methods and priorities that he could use to avoid detection for his own crimes. Kimball's modus operandi involved identifying vulnerable individuals, often women in difficult circumstances, and gaining their trust through elaborate lies about his background and prospects. He would present himself as a successful businessman, sometimes claiming to own various enterprises, and would offer his victims opportunities that seemed like chances to improve their lives dramatically. The relationship between Kimball and Agent Schlaff became problematic in several ways. According to court documents and testimony, Schlaff had sanctioned the first meeting between Kimball and Jennifer Marcum, but Kimball soon began seeing her on his own accord. This suggests that Jennifer's introduction to her future killer may have occurred through an official FBI operation, a fact that adds a particularly tragic dimension to the case. Kimball was simultaneously reporting to the FBI about criminal activities, some real, some fabricated, while planning and executing murders. He was able to maintain this double life because his handlers trusted the information he was providing and had no reason to suspect that their informant was actually a serial killer. The scope of Kimball's crimes during his time as an FBI informant was extensive. In addition to Jennifer Marcum, he murdered Leanne Emery, KCMC Leod, and his own uncle, Terry Kimball. Each of these crimes involved similar patterns of manipulation and deception, with Kimball gaining his victims' trust before killing them. Understanding Scott Kimball's criminal methods provides crucial insight into how he was able to victimize Jennifer Marcum and others while simultaneously maintaining his role as an FBI informant. Kimball's approach to murder was characterized by meticulous planning, psychological manipulation, and a disturbing ability to compartmentalize his criminal activities from his official cooperation with law enforcement. Kimball's victim selection followed a clear pattern. He targeted individuals who were vulnerable in some way, financially desperate, socially isolated, or in circumstances that made them susceptible to offers of help or opportunity. Jennifer Marcum fit this profile perfectly. She was working in the adult entertainment industry, likely struggling financially and hoping for opportunities to improve her situation. The psychological manipulation Kimball employed was sophisticated and cruel. Rather than simply overpowering his victims, he invested considerable time and effort in gaining their complete trust. He would create elaborate fictional backgrounds for himself, complete with business ventures, financial resources, and plans that seemed to offer his victims genuine opportunities for better lives. In Jennifer's case, Kimball constructed the story about owning coffee shops in Seattle and needing someone to help manage them. This wasn't a spontaneous lie. It was a carefully crafted deception designed to appeal to Jennifer's desire for stability and legitimate employment. The story was believable enough to convince Jennifer to move in with him and plan a cross-country relocation. Kimball's use of his FBI informant status was particularly insidious. His regular contact with federal agents provided him with insights into investigative techniques, evidence collection methods, and law enforcement priorities. This knowledge helped him avoid detection and may have influenced his choices about how and where to commit his crimes. The disposal of bodies was another area where Kimball demonstrated criminal sophistication. He chose remote locations in Colorado's vast wilderness areas, places where remains could be hidden for years or even decades without discovery. His knowledge of the terrain and his understanding of search methods likely influenced these choices. Kimball's ability to maintain his cover as a productive FBI informant while simultaneously committing murders represents one of the most disturbing aspects of his criminal career. He was providing information to federal agents, attending meetings, following protocols, and presenting himself as a valuable asset to law enforcement, all while planning and executing homicides. The timeline of Kimball's crimes reveals the extent of his criminal activity during his period as an informant. Between 2002 and 2004, he was responsible for at least 4 murders, possibly more. This level of criminal activity, occurring simultaneously with his cooperation with federal agents, represents a massive failure in the informant management system. The evidence that eventually led to Scott Kimball's conviction for multiple murders, including Jennifer Marcum's death, came from a combination of sources: physical evidence from his other crimes, witness testimonies, and ultimately his own confessions. However, Kimball's confessions were complicated by his pattern of lies and misdirection, making it difficult to determine the complete truth about his crimes. The initial break in the case came through investigations into the disappearances of Leanne Emery and Casey MC Leod, other victims of Kimball's killing spree. Physical evidence and witness testimony in these cases eventually pointed to Kimball as the perpetrator, leading to his arrest and the broader investigation into his criminal activities. Once in custody, Kimball began providing information about his crimes, but his statements were inconsistent and often contradictory. This pattern of selective truth-telling and deliberate misdirection made it challenging for investigators to determine the full scope of his criminal activity and the locations of all his victims' remains. Regarding Jennifer Marcum's murder, Kimball provided multiple conflicting accounts. Initially, he claimed that Jennifer had been killed by associates of her boyfriend involved in drug activities, positioning himself as merely a witness to the aftermath. He told investigators that he had seen photographs of Jennifer's body and knew details about how she had been killed, but claimed he was not directly responsible. Later, Kimball changed his story, admitting to direct involvement in Jennifer's death but providing conflicting information about the circumstances and location of the crime. At various times, he claimed that Jennifer's body had been disposed of in different locations, including areas around Rifle, Colorado, approximately 150 miles west of Denver. The reliability of Kimball's confessions became a significant challenge for investigators. While he admitted to killing Jennifer and provided some details that only the perpetrator would know, his pattern of lies made it impossible to determine which specific details were accurate. This was particularly frustrating for Jennifer's family and law enforcement because it meant that even with a confession, they still couldn't locate her remains. Physical evidence specific to Jennifer's case was limited. Her abandoned vehicle provided some forensic opportunities, but after more than a year since the crime, much of the potential evidence had been compromised or was no longer recoverable. The lack of a crime scene and the absence of Jennifer's body meant that investigators had to rely heavily on Kimball's statements, despite their questionable reliability. The legal strategy for prosecuting Kimball involved charges for multiple murders. District Attorney Stan Garnett structured the plea agreement to require Kimball to take responsibility for all 4 known murders as part of any deal. This approach ensured that Jennifer's case would be resolved legally, even if her remains were never found. More than 20 years have passed since Jennifer Lynn Marcum disappeared on February 17, 2003, and while her case has reached a legal conclusion, it remains heartbreakingly incomplete for her family and the law enforcement officials who continue to search for her remains. Scott Kimball was sentenced to 70 years in prison in 2009 for multiple murders, including Jennifer's death. The legal proceedings provided some measure of justice. Her killer was identified, prosecuted, and will spend the rest of his life behind bars. However, the absence of Jennifer's body means that the case lacks the closure that comes with recovery and proper burial of remains. The FBI continues to list Jennifer as a missing person despite the conviction of her killer. This designation reflects the reality that while the criminal case has been resolved, the missing person case remains active. Law enforcement agencies continue to follow up on tips and conduct searches when new information becomes available. Over the years, there have been periodic searches in various locations across Colorado based on tips from the public, reanalysis of Kimball's statements, and advances in search technology. These efforts have included ground searches, aerial surveys, and the use of specialized equipment designed to locate buried remains. Unfortunately, none of these searches have been successful in locating Jennifer's body. The passage of time has made the search increasingly challenging. After more than 2 decades, environmental factors would have significantly affected any remains, making detection more difficult even with sophisticated equipment. The vast Colorado landscape, with its diverse terrain ranging from urban areas to remote wilderness, provides countless potential locations where remains could be hidden. Advances in technology have provided new tools for searching, including ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs with enhanced training, and satellite imagery analysis. These technologies have been employed in various searches related to Kimball's victims, but the specific challenges of Jennifer's case, the lack of reliable information about the disposal location and the passage of time, have limited their effectiveness. The case has also been affected by changes in law enforcement personnel and priorities over the years. Investigators who were originally assigned to the case have retired or moved to other positions, and new investigators have had to familiarize themselves with the details. However, the commitment to finding Jennifer remains strong among Colorado law enforcement agencies. Jennifer's case has become part of the broader discussion about FBI informant operations and the oversight of such programs. The fact that Kimball was able to commit multiple murders while serving as a confidential source has led to reviews of informant management procedures and policies designed to prevent similar tragedies in the future. The search for Jennifer Marcum's remains represents one of the most persistent and comprehensive efforts in Colorado missing persons history. Despite the challenges posed by time, terrain, and unreliable information, law enforcement agencies, volunteer organizations, and Jennifer's family have never given up hope of finding her and bringing her home. Search efforts have been conducted in multiple locations across Colorado, based on various pieces of information and tips received over the years. The area around Rifle, Colorado has received particular attention based on one of Kimball's accounts, though investigators recognize that his statements may not be reliable. This region, approximately 150 miles west of Denver, encompasses rugged terrain including mountains, valleys, and waterways where remains could be concealed. Modern search techniques have evolved significantly since 2003, providing new opportunities to locate remains that might have been missed in earlier efforts. Ground-penetrating radar can detect disturbances in soil that might indicate burial sites. Specialized cadaver dogs are trained to detect human remains even after decades of decomposition. Aerial surveys using drones and specialized photography can identify subtle changes in vegetation or terrain that might indicate human intervention. Volunteer search organizations have played a crucial role in efforts to find Jennifer. Groups like the Colorado Search and Rescue Association and specialized missing persons organizations have donated thousands of hours to searching for Jennifer and other missing persons. These volunteers bring expertise, equipment, and dedication that supplements official law enforcement resources. The search efforts have been complicated by the vast scope of potential locations. Kimball had access to vehicles and knowledge of Colorado's geography, meaning Jennifer's remains could theoretically be located anywhere within a several hundred-mile radius of Denver. This geographical challenge has required strategic prioritization of search areas based on available information and resources. The emotional toll of ongoing search efforts cannot be overlooked. For Jennifer's family, each new search represents both hope and the potential for disappointment. For law enforcement officials and volunteers, the continued failure to locate Jennifer's remains is a constant reminder of an incomplete mission and a family that continues to suffer. The search for Jennifer Marcum's remains faces a unique combination of challenges that illustrate why some missing person cases remain unsolved even when the perpetrator is known and convicted. Understanding these obstacles helps explain why, despite decades of effort and resources, Jennifer has not yet been found. The primary challenge is the fundamental unreliability of information from Scott Kimball. Even when confessing to Jennifer's murder, Kimball continued to lie and misdirect investigators. He provided multiple conflicting accounts of how he disposed of Jennifer's body, claiming different locations, methods, and circumstances. This pattern of deliberate deception means that investigators cannot rely on his statements to guide search efforts effectively. Kimball's criminal sophistication compounds this problem. As someone with knowledge of law enforcement techniques and access to information through his FBI informant status, he likely chose disposal locations specifically because they would be difficult to find. His understanding of search methods and evidence recovery techniques may have influenced his decisions about where and how to hide Jennifer's body. The geographic scope of the potential search area is enormous. Colorado encompasses more than 104,000 square miles of diverse terrain, including urban areas, agricultural land, forests, mountains, deserts, and waterways. Jennifer's remains could theoretically be located anywhere within a several hundred-mile radius of Denver, giving Kimball's access to transportation and time to travel. Environmental factors present additional challenges. Colorado's climate includes extreme temperature variations, significant seasonal weather changes, and natural processes that would affect human remains over a 20-year period. Freeze-thaw cycles, erosion, wildlife activity, and vegetation growth all contribute to the natural concealment or dispersal of evidence over time. The terrain itself presents physical obstacles to searching. Many areas of Colorado are accessible only on foot or with specialized equipment. Mountainous regions, dense forests, and remote wilderness areas require significant resources and expertise to search effectively. Some locations may be dangerous for search teams due to unstable terrain, wildlife, or weather conditions. Resource limitations affect the scope and frequency of search efforts. Comprehensive searches require significant personnel, equipment, and funding, while law enforcement agencies and volunteer organizations remain committed to finding Jennifer. They must balance these efforts with other ongoing cases and responsibilities. The costs of large-scale searches can be prohibitive, particularly when conducted repeatedly in different locations based on uncertain information. The passage of time has also created practical challenges for the investigation. Original investigators have retired or moved to other positions, taking with them institutional knowledge and familiarity with the case details. New investigators must invest considerable time learning the case history and understanding the complex web of information and misinformation surrounding Kimball's crimes. Jennifer Marcum's case has had implications that extend far beyond her individual tragedy, influencing discussions about FBI informant operations, the vulnerability of marginalized populations, and the unique challenges faced by families when remains are never recovered despite solved cases. The case exposed serious flaws in FBI informant management and oversight procedures. The fact that Scott Kimball was able to commit multiple murders while serving as a confidential human source raised fundamental questions about how informants are supervised, how their activities are monitored, and what safeguards exist to prevent them from committing crimes while under federal protection. In response to the Kimball case and other similar incidents, the FBI has implemented enhanced oversight procedures for informant operations. These include more frequent check-ins, better documentation of informant activities, and clearer guidelines for handlers about when to terminate informant relationships. However, the inherent challenges of managing criminal sources mean that risks can never be completely eliminated. Jennifer's case also highlights the particular vulnerability of certain populations to predators like Kimball. Women working in the adult entertainment industry, individuals struggling with financial instability, and people seeking opportunities to improve their circumstances are often targeted by criminals who exploit their desperation and hope. The case has contributed to broader awareness about the challenges faced by families of missing persons when remains are never recovered. Even when legal justice is achieved through conviction of the perpetrator, families continue to suffer from the lack of closure that comes with never being able to properly bury their loved one. Jennifer's story has become part of the larger conversation about serial killers who use positions of trust or authority to access victims. The fact that Kimball was able to use his FBI informant status to facilitate his crimes represents a particularly disturbing variant of this type of criminal behavior. The case has also influenced training and awareness programs for individuals who might be vulnerable to similar predators. Organizations working with at-risk populations now include information about the sophisticated manipulation techniques used by criminals like Kimball, helping potential victims recognize and avoid dangerous situations. Even though Scott Kimball has been convicted of Jennifer Marcum's murder, the search for her remains continues, and public assistance remains crucial to potentially solving this aspect of the case. There are several ways that viewers can contribute to ongoing efforts to find Jennifer and bring her home to her family. If you have any information about Jennifer's case, no matter how insignificant it might seem, please contact the appropriate authorities. The FBI Denver field office can be contacted, and they continue to accept tips related to Jennifer's case. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation also maintains an active file on the case and can be contacted through their tip line. Specific types of information that could be valuable include any recollections of Scott Kimball's activities or locations he frequented during 2003, information about vehicles he had access to or areas he visited, any statements he might have made about disposal of evidence or bodies, and any observations about suspicious activity in remote areas of Colorado around the time of Jennifer's disappearance. Jennifer had distinctive identifying features that could help confirm identity if remains are discovered. She had breast implants with documented serial numbers, and an IUD was in place at the time of her disappearance. If anyone discovers human remains in Colorado, particularly in remote areas, it's crucial to contact law enforcement immediately rather than disturbing the scene. The area around Rifle, Colorado, approximately 150 miles west of Denver, has been mentioned in connection with Jennifer's case based on one of Kimball's accounts. While his reliability is questionable, anyone with information about suspicious activity in this region during 2003 or the discovery of unusual items or disturbances should report it to authorities. Social media can be a valuable tool for keeping Jennifer's case in public awareness. Sharing information about her case, particularly on anniversary dates like February 17th, helps ensure that new people learn about the ongoing search for her remains. However, it's important to share only verified information from official sources to avoid spreading misinformation. Volunteer search organizations occasionally organize efforts related to missing persons cases. While specific searches for Jennifer are not regularly scheduled, staying connected with organizations like the Colorado Search and Rescue Association or local missing persons advocacy groups can provide opportunities to participate in search efforts when they occur. For Jennifer Marcum's family, the past 20 years have been marked by a complex mixture of legal resolution and ongoing anguish. While Scott Kimball's conviction provided some measure of justice and confirmed what happened to Jennifer, the absence of her remains has denied the family the closure that comes with being able to properly lay a loved one to rest. Throughout the years since Jennifer's disappearance, her family has had to navigate the complex emotions that come with high-profile criminal cases. They have seen their daughter's killer prosecuted and convicted, which provided some satisfaction, but they have also had to live with the knowledge that Jennifer's body remains missing, potentially in a location where she cannot be properly honored and remembered. The family has likely experienced the roller coaster of emotions that comes with periodic searches and tips. Each new potential lead brings hope that Jennifer might finally be found, but also the risk of disappointment when searches prove unsuccessful. This cycle of hope and disappointment can be emotionally exhausting for families of missing persons. Despite the challenges they have faced, Jennifer's family has remained committed to keeping her memory alive and supporting efforts to find her remains. They have cooperated with law enforcement investigations, provided information when requested, and maintained hope that Jennifer will eventually be found and brought home. The family's experience illustrates the broader challenges faced by families of missing persons, particularly in cases where the perpetrator is known but remains are never recovered. Support services for these families have evolved over the years, recognizing the unique needs of people dealing with this type of loss. Jennifer Marcum's case provides important lessons about personal safety and the sophisticated methods used by predators to exploit vulnerable individuals. Understanding these lessons can help others avoid similar situations and recognize warning signs of potentially dangerous relationships. The manipulation techniques used by Scott Kimball were sophisticated and deliberate. He invested considerable time in gaining Jennifer's trust, creating elaborate lies about his background and prospects, and presenting himself as someone who could dramatically improve her life circumstances. These are classic grooming behaviors used by predators to gain control over their victims. Warning signs that someone might be using similar manipulation techniques include offers that seem too good to be true, particularly from people you haven't known for very long, attempts to isolate you from family and friends or discourage you from maintaining other relationships, pressure to make major life changes quickly, such as moving to a new location or changing jobs, reluctance to introduce you to their family, friends, or business associates, and inconsistencies in their stories about their background, work, or financial situation. For individuals who work in industries that might make them more vulnerable to predators, additional precautions can be valuable. This includes maintaining strong connections with family and friends who can serve as a safety network, being cautious about sharing personal information with customers or clients, trusting instincts when something feels wrong about a situation or person, and having safety plans in place for potentially dangerous situations. The case of Jennifer Lynn Marcum represents a complex intersection of personal tragedy, criminal manipulation, and systemic failures that combine to create one of Colorado's most disturbing and enduring mysteries. While we know who killed Jennifer and that person has been brought to justice, the absence of her remains means that this case remains frustratingly incomplete more than 20 years after her disappearance. The ongoing search for Jennifer's remains illustrates both the dedication of law enforcement professionals and the unique challenges faced by families when loved ones are never found. Despite decades of effort, advances in technology, and the commitment of numerous individuals and organizations, Jennifer has not yet been located. This reality is a sobering reminder of how difficult it can be to find someone who has been deliberately concealed by a sophisticated criminal. Jennifer's case has contributed to important changes in FBI informant management, increased awareness about the vulnerability of certain populations to predators, and ongoing discussions about how to better support families of missing persons. While these developments cannot bring Jennifer back or undo the trauma experienced by her family, they represent efforts to prevent similar tragedies in the future. The persistence of law enforcement officials, volunteer searchers, and Jennifer's family in continuing to look for her remains demonstrates a commitment to the principle that every person deserves to be found and properly laid to rest. This commitment honors Jennifer's memory and provides hope that she may eventually be brought home. Future search efforts may benefit from continued advances in technology, including improved ground-penetrating radar, enhanced cadaver, dog training techniques, and more sophisticated analysis of environmental factors that might help narrow potential search areas. Artificial intelligence and machine learning applications may also provide new approaches to analyzing the vast amounts of information collected over the years. The case also serves as a reminder of the importance of public awareness and involvement in missing persons cases. The information that ultimately leads to finding Jennifer could come from any source: a hiker who notices something unusual, a landowner who discovers suspicious items on their property, or someone who remembers details about Scott Kimball's activities that they didn't previously think were important. Remember Jennifer's identifying features. She had breast implants with documented serial numbers, and an IUD was in place at the time of her disappearance. If human remains are discovered anywhere in Colorado, particularly in remote areas, contact law enforcement immediately without disturbing the scene. Please consider sharing Jennifer's story and this information with others. Social media, word of mouth, and continued public awareness all contribute to keeping her case active and increasing the chances that someone with relevant information will come forward. Jennifer Lynn Marcum was 25 years old when she disappeared on February 17, 2003. She would be 47 years old today. She deserves to be found. She deserves to come home. Her family deserves closure. With continued effort, advancing technology, and public awareness, there is still hope that Jennifer will be located and this long chapter of uncertainty can finally be closed. If this case unsettled you, if it raised more questions than it answered, tell us what you think in the comments. For more deep dives into true crime that echoes long after the verdict, subscribe to Vanished Voices, where real crime unfolds in plain sight. Thank you for watching. If this case intrigued you, hit the subscribe button for more true crime fictional stories.